Explorers. We are back again today with another ELA lesson for you guys. On this story, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. If you have not listened to this story yet on YouTube, go ahead and click the link we provided for you so you can listen to this story so you can be ready to do today's activities with me. So we today are going to talk about character traits and how characters change throughout stories. So we're going to be talking about our main character here, William. His character traits, so what makes him him, some of the different things that he does and the way he is. We're going to talk about those, and then we're going to talk about his journey through this story from start to finish, if he changed at all, or what he learned in this story. So stay tuned, and we are going to be talking about character traits today. So see you guys in a minute. Bye. All right, boys and girls, so we are going to answer today's questions that you were supposed to do yesterday. If you have not done these questions yet, you may go ahead and pause the video and try to do them on your own, and then watch the video to check your answers, or you may go ahead and just follow along and answer along with me. So the first question that we told you guys to answer yesterday was list 3 character traits that can be used to describe William. Now, when we're thinking about character traits, we want to think about words that really describe his personality, okay? We don't really want to use words like good, nice, words like that. We want better words that are really used to describe specific traits about William. So let's think through this story. One thing that really sticks out to me in this story is it talks about how he was a dreamer. It says the darkness was best for dreaming, and then it talks about how he dreamed of building things and taking them apart, and he asks lots of questions. If I can hear the music, then where's the band? And so to me this shows, again, here's another question. How does its engine make it go? So this makes me think that William is very curious. Curious means you're always wondering about things. He's very curious. And I'm not writing this in a complete sentence because it just says list 3 character traits. So we do not have to put this in a complete sentence. Okay, the next thing I want to think about when it comes to William is I can see here in this picture that he's working in the fields, okay? And then it talks about how he went to the library and started reading books and had to translate the words because the books were in English, and he had to translate them to his language. So to me, that tells me that he is a hard worker, working in the fields as just a boy and taking all the time to read books and translate them to his language makes me think that William is a very hard worker. So he's curious, a hard worker, and then in the story, he gets it in his mind after reading these books about natural energy that he wants to build a windmill. And so he starts to, he decides that he's going to build electric wind. And so he starts getting junk from the junkyard. And even though all the people around him are saying he's crazy, he's getting trash out of the junkyard, he does not stop. He continues to do what he has set his mind to. Even when all the people around him are kind of wondering, what on earth is he doing with this trash? They're saying, what is he doing now? They're shaking their heads, and his friends come and help him. But this shows me that even though everyone around him is wondering, what is he doing? He's acting weird and being strange. He doesn't stop. And that shows me that he is very determined. He's showing determination. So those are the 3 words I chose to describe William. He's curious, he's a hard worker, and he's very determined. now, number 2. Did William change in any way throughout this story? If so, how? Use ACE to respond. Now remember, we have answer the question, cite your evidence, and explain your answer. The ACE anchor chart is going to be right down below on the Google Sheet on the page for today of learning activities. So if you don't remember the anchor chart for how to write an ACE response, go ahead and look at that. But I'm going to show you right here. The first thing we're going to do is answer the question. So, William changed in this story How did William change in this story? We have to think about how he changed from the beginning of the story to the end. So, just like we talked about a moment ago, at the beginning of the story, William is a dreamer. He's curious. He's always thinking and wondering about how things work, how things are built, dreaming about taking things apart and putting them back together. And so he's a dreamer, but does he really do a whole lot with those thoughts? Not really. They're really just in his mind, and that's as far as they go. But because of the circumstance with his village, with them not having enough food and water to water their crops, and his family's situation where he only gets to eat one meal a day and doesn't get to go to school, all these things that happen in his life cause him to make a change. He doesn't just dream anymore. He doesn't just imagine and think. Now he takes those thoughts and starts to gain knowledge. And with that knowledge, he turns it into action. So he builds a windmill for his village. And that's the cool thing about William, was at the beginning of the story, he was just a boy who liked to imagine and dream and think. But at the end, he actually used that to do something. So I believe he changed in the story because he went from being merely curious about how things worked and imaginative to actually building a windmill. So there's my A in my ACE response. I answered the question. William changed in this story because he went from being merely curious about how things worked and imaginative to actually building a windmill. The next step in the ACE response is for me to cite my evidence. That's the C in our ACE response. So I have to look in the story for pieces of evidence that show how he changed from the beginning of the story to the end. So I said at the beginning he was imaginative, he was a dreamer, he was curious. So whenever I do a character change ACE response, I like to actually sometimes give 2 pieces of evidence, because I like to show how the character was at the beginning and then show a piece of evidence of how they were at the end. So I think on this page, whenever he's dreaming, is a great piece of evidence to show how he was at the beginning. It says right here, he dreamed of building things and taking them apart. So I'm going to use that for my first piece of evidence. William changed in the story because he went from being merely curious about how things work and imaginative to actually building a windmill. I know this because in the beginning of the story, it says, and here come my quotation marks. Now remember, if you're taking something straight from the text, you always have to use quotation marks, and you always have to copy it word for word. So I'm going to put this right here so I don't miss any words. In the beginning of the story, it says, he dreamed of building things and taking them apart. And put my quotes at the end. Okay, let's read what we have so far. William changed in the story because he went from being merely curious about how things worked and imaginative to actually building a windmill. I know this because in the beginning of the story it says, he dreamed of building things and taking them apart. Then I'm going to give my evidence from the end of the story whenever he changed. And I think this right here is a great piece, and it says, Tonga, he shouted, I have made electric wind. Towards the end of the story, he built a windmill. It says, and here comes my next piece of evidence, again, quotation marks because I'm quoting it straight from the story. Tonga. And I actually have to put 3 quotation marks here because he's speaking and I'm quoting from the text. It's kind of interesting, but that's how it goes. So Tonga, 1 quotation mark, because he's done talking right there. He shouted, period. Another quotation mark because he's talking again. Just 1 though. I have made, electric wind, exclamation point, and then 3 quotation marks at the end because I'm done quoting my text and he's done talking. So, let's read what we have so far again. William changed in this story because he went from being merely curious about how things worked and imaginative to actually building a windmill. I know this because in the beginning of the story it says, he dreamed of building things and taking them apart. Towards the end of the story, he built a windmill. It says, Tonga, he shouted, I have made electric wind. So there is our text evidence. We did the A, we answered the question. We did the C, we cited text evidence, and now we need to explain. William changed in this story because at the beginning he was a dreamer. but did not do anything about it. In the end, he put his thoughts to action and built something. And there's my explanation. So I know it seems long, but if you follow the ACE response, it'll really take you step by step and it won't be that difficult. So number 2 says, did William change in any way throughout the story? If so, how? Use ACE to respond. William changed in this story because he went from being merely curious about how things worked and imaginative to actually building a windmill. I know this because in the beginning of the story it says, he dreamed of building things and taking them apart. Towards the end of the story, he built a windmill. It says, Tonga, he shouted, I have made electric wind. William changed in this story because at the beginning he was a dreamer, but did not do anything about it. In the end, he put his thoughts to action and built something. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our ACE response on how William changed throughout the story. If you need to pause it, go ahead so you can copy it down if you need to. If you did this on your own, of course, it's not going to look exactly like mine, and that is perfectly fine. Just make sure you followed each step and you answered the question. And thank you guys for following along, and we will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.